Hey guys, tonight we're drifting off to the gentle whisper of waves lapping a forgotten shore, the clink of ceramic cups against sun-warmed stone, and the barely perceptible rustle of parchment laws being reinterpreted for the 100th time. You're arriving on a little Greek island nobody seems to remember the name of, not because it's mysterious, but because everyone argues about what to call it. Some say it's Aegeos, others swear it's Papadokos, and one fisherman insists it's just the rock. This island is small, not charmingly small, annoyingly small. You can walk from one end to the other during a podcast episode, and you will trip over a goat at least once doing it. The island's sun is so bright it makes your eyes wince, and the breeze smells of thyme, salt, and a hint of roasted sardines someone forgot on a windowsill. You'd think this place would be peaceful, like the kind of Mediterranean escape featured on overly filtered Instagram reels. But no. The people here are louder than a marketplace on discount fig day, and more opinionated than a Facebook thread about olive oil. And somehow, this is a democracy. You probably wouldn't survive a week here. Their rules are absurd, their debates endless, and their idea of government transparency involves literally shouting ideas into a clay amphora. But somehow it all kind of works. Barely. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where and when you're listening from. I love hearing if it's 2 a.m. in Bangkok or a rainy afternoon in Norway. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You land figuratively gently on a pebble-strewn path. There's no airport, of course. This place isn't even on all maps. The boat that dropped you off was barely more than a canoe with attitude. And as you step onto the island, the first thing you notice is that no one notices you. Everyone's already arguing about something. One woman balancing a jar of pickles on her head is shouting, "The council can't meet without the fish vote." To which an older man replies, "The fish abstained, that was clear." Another person nods sagely, biting into a fig as if it contains ancient wisdom. "Democracy," he mumbles through pulp and seeds. You move past them, ducking under strings of drying laundry that seem to function as both clothing and signage. A wooden board nailed to a fig tree reads in smudged ink, "Welcome to Aegeos, land of laws, loopholes, and loud voices." Below that, "Please don't pet the goat unless it initiates contact." You continue. A cluster of buildings made of white stone and faded blue doors crouches against the hillside like they're trying not to draw attention. You see what appears to be a courthouse. A modest dome structure with a giant crack down the front, like someone tried to open it like an egg. The entrance is propped open by a stick, labeled "Law Stick, Do Not Remove." Inside it smells like lemon oil and paper rot. You peer into a room full of amphorae, each labeled in handwriting that can only be described as aggressively cursive. This, you later learn, is the archive. It contains every law the island has ever passed, or argued about passing, or considered reversing after lunch. The oldest scroll dates back over 700 years. It's just one sentence: "No fish shall be traded for promises." Historians still debate what it means. Some say it's about politics, others say it was just a metaphor that got out of hand. A few think it wasn't even about fish. You make your way to the square. A group of citizens has gathered around a raised platform that looks suspiciously like an old wine barrel. On it stands a man with a booming voice and a long tunic covered in patches of text. He's the town crier, or as they call him here, the noise clerk. He's announcing today's main agenda. Item 1, reconsideration of the law of noon silence. Item 2, proposal to limit oregano use in public feasts. Item 3, whether the island goat may again serve as mascot. Each item is followed by collective groaning or applause, sometimes both. The sun inches across the sky, casting long shadows over the cobbled stones. You're pulled to a shady bench by the scent of roasting nuts and a breeze that carries whispers of political banter. The woman next to you, without, looking up from her knitting, says, "Careful. If they think you're new, someone might draft you into the Judicial Nap Committee." You laugh, unsure if she's serious. Spoiler, she is. Later that day, a man approaches. He wears sandals made from old voting ballots and a crown of basil leaves. With no introduction, he tells you, you may have heard of Athens, Sparta, Rhodes, but none of them had a functioning pigeon-based mail vote relay system. We did, until the pigeons unionized. You smile politely because what else can you do? But deep down, something stirs. Beneath the absurdity and the broken amphorae, under the noise and sunburns and goat warnings, there's a sense of order. Odd, ancient, fragile order. You realize this place isn't chaotic because it doesn't care. It's chaotic because it cares too much. Every voice is loud because every voice wants to be heard. Even the one shouting right now. I demand to know who changed the sundial again. It's not even noon. No one answers, but someone hands him a peach. As night creeps in, you find a place on the hill overlooking the square. The lights below flicker like thoughts. People continue talking, even in the dark. Debates don't stop here. They just get quieter. Less about policy, more about poetry. Less yelling, more murmurs. Someone's reciting a legal document as a bedtime story to their child. You lie down on the dry grass, stars yawning above you. The island hums like an old lullaby, and just before you fall asleep, you hear someone whisper, "You know, democracy started as a dare, and we never back down." You smile. Tomorrow you'll find out what happens when the island's oldest citizen interrupts a council vote by yelling at the sea. But for now, you rest. You wake to the unmistakable sound of someone yelling at the ocean. The sun is still low, gold just beginning to stretch across the tiled rooftops like honey spilling from a careless breakfast. Seagulls swirl in lazy spirals overhead, screaming at nothing in particular. The air smells of brine, rosemary, and the faint echo of burnt toast. You sit up, your back stiff from sleeping on a hill scattered with philosophical pebbles. And yes, they do feel more opinionated than normal rocks. Down by the shore, a figure stands knee-deep in the waves, arms flailing with purpose. His white beard is long enough to be mistaken for a fishing net, and his tunic is damp from repeated sea spray, but his voice is unwavering. "I refuse your tyranny, ocean. Your currents shall not silence us today." A small crowd watches from the sand, sipping coffee from mismatched cups. You shuffle closer. A woman with a sun hat made from woven olive branches whispers, "That's Geryon. He was the first to be elected by unanimous noise." You blink. "Unanimous noise?" She nods sagely. Every citizen on the island clapped, stomped, or shouted at the same time. It wasn't planned, just very democratic. Geryon roars again. "No more erosion without representation," and the crowd applauds. Apparently, this is part of a long-standing tradition called the Morning Declaration of Independent Wetness. It's ceremonial. But technically, under Island Subclause 18.7, the person who yells at the sea first each morning retains temporary veto power over any fish-related legislation until sundown. That's right. Your day starts with a semi-legal ocean protest and an old man who hasn't blinked since sunrise. You wander back into the village square where the stone tiles are still cool beneath your feet. Someone has chalked a message in sprawling handwriting across the public notice board. Today's council. Debate on law of pebble weight. Consistency continues. Bring your scales. You pass by the bakery. The baker waves you in, grinning, under a moustache that curls like a seahorse. "Try this," he says, pressing a warm round of bread into your hands. It's the official voting loaf. You're not supposed to eat it until the midday council session, but between you and me, I never follow that law. You take a bite. It's chewy, fragrant with time and regret. "Did you vote for the new zoning ordinance?" he asks. You mumble something incoherent through crumbs. He nods approvingly. "Same here. Total nonsense. They want to separate goat zones from people zones, as if the goats will listen." He's not wrong. You exit the bakery just as a large man with a clipboard walks past, scribbling furiously. "Law enforcement documentation volunteer," someone whispers. Unpaid, but terrifying. A group gathers around the town's central fountain, a small stone sculpture of a man tripping over democracy, or possibly a turtle. There's an argument brewing, loud and chaotic like waves crashing into spaghetti. A woman named Thassa, draped in scarves that seem to be plotting against each other, holds up a pebble in each hand. One is black, one is white. Simple. Yes or no. We've done this for centuries, she says. Another man interrupts, holding up a third pebble. But what if we want to vote, maybe? Gasps. Someone drops a fig. Thassa narrows her eyes. You can't just invent a maybe pebble. The system would collapse, he shrugs. So, let it collapse gently, like a tired donkey. You watch the debate unfold like a very low-budget opera. Eventually, the elders rule that the maybe pebble is only valid if accompanied by a limerick, which brings you to the heart of how this island works. Nothing is clear, but everything is negotiated, and loudly. As the sun rises higher, the council gathers under the old fig tree. A ring of mismatched chairs, one of which is clearly a toilet seat, forms their circle of power. Today's session is being moderated by someone called the Echo Clerk, whose job is to repeat every statement in a more dramatic tone. It goes like this. Someone says, "I propose we reinforce the seawall with goat wool." And the Echo Clerk bellows, "A mighty seawall of fluffy defense." Everyone nods solemnly. You settle under the fig tree with a few locals. A man next to you offers dried apricots from a pouch labeled debate snacks. You accept because rejecting debate snacks is technically a social offense, not illegal, just deeply frowned upon. Suddenly, the discussion turns to the island's most divisive issue, seating hierarchy at public banquets. An older woman leans toward you, whispering, "This started in 1783, when a man named Darius claimed he deserved to sit closer to the olives than anyone else." You raise an eyebrow. He said he brought the olives. Turns out he didn't. They were wild. And thus began a centuries-long feud about who gets to sit where, depending on how much culinary proximity honor they've earned. One time, they almost went to war over this, like actual war. Someone built a catapult out of picnic chairs. The vote on this matter is swift and oddly graceful. Everyone tosses pebbles into clay jars. The white ones hit with a soft clink, the black with a dull thud. It's like listening to rainfall on pottery. The vote fails. Olive seating remains a sacred chaos. After the council adjourns, you wander toward the edge of the village, passing a goat sunbathing on a scroll. You pause beside a wooden plaque half buried in the dust. You brush it off and read, "On this spot the first law was not passed, but they tried, and that effort counts." It's hard to know if this is a joke, a poem, or a failed attempt at historical record. On this island, it's probably all three. You end the day on the same hill where you started. The breeze carries laughter, the clang of cookware, and the faint echo of someone still shouting at the sea. It could be Geryon. It could be someone new. Honestly, it's hard to tell anymore. You close your eyes. The island hums again, like a place that shouldn't work but does, because its people love it just enough to keep trying. Tomorrow you'll learn how pebbles became policy, how sifting through sand became civic duty, and why someone once threw an urchin at a judge, but for now, rest. The first thing you hear is the unmistakable sound of democracy being wheeled down a gravel path, literally wheeled. It squeaks. You open your eyes to a cart, rickety, wooden, and suspiciously held together with seaweed twine, being pushed by two teenagers arguing over who should steer the portable policy booth. It's painted blue, or at least what's left of it is, and a sign dangling from the side reads, "Traveling Tribunal. We bring justice to you." You follow them, obviously, because who wouldn't? As it turns out, today is Moving Justice Monday, a weekly tradition where legal matters are settled door to door, partly to reach citizens too stubborn to walk to the council square, and partly because the courthouse is being used as a rehearsal space for the island's a cappella donkey choir. You trail the traveling tribunal into the home of a woman named Petra, whose kitchen smells like roasted lemon and a mild sense of vengeance. The dispute is simple. Petra claims her neighbor's rooster is crowing in an illegal accent. "I don't mind the noise," she insists, arms crossed, "but it's clearly a mainland accent. This is an island bird. We have standards." The tribunal listens carefully, nodding as if this isn't the most ridiculous claim they've heard today. It probably isn't. A small panel of robed elders confers in whispers. One of them pulls out a scroll titled Acceptable Local Noises Revised Edition. Another scribbles a note, "Check rooster dialect archives." Then they rule that the rooster must attend a re-education clucking circle. Everyone claps politely. Justice, apparently, has been served with a side of citrus marinade. You step outside and the wind carries the scent of olives and damp parchment. The traveling tribunal creaks away, stopping next at a house where the crime involves suspiciously symmetrical figs. You continue your stroll through the village. At the edge of the agora, you find an older man chiseling words into a flat stone. Slab. The slab reads, Law 42. No pebbles shall be used for juggling during funerals. He glances up at you. We tried to outlaw sadness, but it didn't work. So now we just discourage inappropriate multitasking. His chisel flicks against the stone with satisfying precision. Tink, tink, tink. Around the corner, a younger man with ink-stained fingers is carving the same law into a wax tablet. Next to him, a woman is painting it onto a clay pot. You raise an eyebrow. 3 formats, she explains. Stone is for permanence, wax is for editing, pottery is for parties. Turns out, every law must be recorded in triplicate, just in case one version gets used as a cutting board or repurposed. Into a wind chime. And yes, the island once accidentally outlawed pickles when someone misread a water-damaged wax tablet. That ban lasted 6 days and nearly caused civil collapse at a wedding buffet. You sit on a sun-warmed step while an old man next to you opens a basket of legal scrolls wrapped in goat leather. His name is Demetrios, and he's the island's unofficial historian of unsuccessful laws. He pulls out one with pride. Law 13. All disputes must be settled via competitive whistling. That didn't last long, he mutters, when everyone realized only 4 citizens could whistle, and one of them was tone-deaf. He shows you another, Law 56. No sarcasm during council sessions. You laugh. So did everyone else, he sighs. That law was repealed mid-sentence. You flip through a few more absurdities. Mandatory toga color coordination on Wednesdays, goat height regulations, a brief experiment with silent debates that led to 2 weeks of intense mime-based misunderstandings. And then he hands you a stone tablet half broken, the text barely legible. Law 1, people should try not to be awful. That one's never been repealed, Demetrios says, but also never enforced. You walk with him down to the harbor where the fishers are coming in, their nets heavy with more seaweed than seafood. Apparently today the fish decided to protest by simply not showing up. There's a sign stuck into a fishing crate that reads, Fish strike demanding better bait. You don't question it. Along the jetty, a group gathers for a civic ritual called pebble reflection. Each participant picks a small pebble and whispers something into it. An opinion, a confession, a half-formed legislative proposal, and then tosses it into the sea. You take part. The pebble is smooth and warm in your hand and you whisper, repeal the law that says naps count as political inactivity. And the sea listens, or maybe it doesn't. Either way, it takes your pebble. You hear laughter behind you as someone drops 3 pebbles in rapid succession. Triple voting is still illegal, shouts a teenager wearing a sash labeled Electoral Integrity Intern. He's ignored. A moment later, an old woman in a cloak shaped like a seagull's wing stands atop her crate. She lifts her hands and cries out, let the legislative lottery begin. Gasps ripple across the crowd. Everyone hushes. A stone drum is brought forward, filled with names. Every week, someone whispers to you. They choose one citizen at random to write a new law. It's a civic honor and a public hazard. The drum spins. A hand reaches in. A name is drawn. Yanis the Quiet. There's a collective groan. Last time he legalized whispering competitions in libraries. Someone mutters. Yanis steps forward, pale and blinking like he just woke up from a century-long nap. He clears his throat. I propose everyone leans in. That all laws must henceforth include a poetic stanza. Rhyming optional. Silence. Then an elder shouts, motion to accept if the stanza is read in iambic pentameter. A second voice adds, only if followed by a goat parade. A vote is taken immediately by foot stomping and synchronized kazoo blasts. The result is inconclusive. A revote is scheduled for next Tuesday's sunset. During the ceremonial cheese tossing, you turn toward the cliffs where the sun now paints the world in molten orange. The island is aglow, all rough edges gilded in light. Back in the village square, the council has convened one final time to update the Book of Interpretations. It's a large volume bound in leather, kept beneath the mayor's sleeping cat. It contains every alternate meaning, loophole, and creative misunderstanding ever argued in court. They're on page 842. You sit quietly and listen as one councillor explains a new footnote under Law 22, the legality of dancing while disagreeing. Apparently, rhythmic disagreement is only permitted during odd-numbered months. Unless you're wearing bells, then it's fine year-round. No one questions it, because here, things don't have to make perfect sense. They just have to feel fair. You walk home, slowly, past candlelit windows, past the smell of garlic and sea salt, past a cat with one eye wearing a tiny judge's hat, asleep on a stack of summonses. As you reach your hilltop once again, the wind curls gently around you like a blanket someone forgot to fold. Somewhere below, a drum beats softly, the sound of democracy lurching through the streets on creaky wheels. Tomorrow, you'll learn how goats were once granted temporary voting rights, why a courtroom was built entirely of mirrors, and how a cucumber nearly caused a constitutional crisis. But for now, breathe. The stars are above you, and the law, somehow, is with you. Morning arrives like a sleepy olive, slow to roll, slightly oily, and unmistakably Mediterranean. The sun doesn't rise so much as saunter, draping itself over the terracotta rooftops and sheep-dotted hills like it owns the place. Which, depending on who you ask, it kind of does. You stretch, blink at the world, and remember with a groggy chuckle that yes, democracy is still rolling around the island in a squeaky cart, and yes, there's a law about cucumber shapes you were promised. So, you get up. Because why wouldn't you want to hear about that? The streets are quieter today. Less kazoo, more clinking of breakfast spoons in ceramic bowls. The scent of warm bread and lemon tea pulls you toward the agora, where today's civic theme is founding. Myths, goats, and the great constitutional vegetable crisis. You sit beneath a fig tree that's been legally designated as neutral ground for political snacks, and an old woman begins to speak. She introduces herself as Aunt Theodora, not your aunt, everyone's aunt, and insists on holding a dried fig like a microphone. You want to know how this democracy really began? She begins, peering at you over her spectacles. Not that polished myth about wise elders and glittering togas. The real story? You nod. It started with a goat named Bubulina. Naturally, apparently before the island had any formal government, disputes were settled in an open-air market with the help of a particularly assertive goat. Bubulina had a knack for headbutting people mid-argument, especially when they were being unreasonable. She knew justice, Aunt Theodora says, or she hated shouting. Either way, it worked. Eventually, the townsfolk started inviting Bubulina to every debate. Her presence became symbolic. Some even claimed she could smell corruption. A local sculptor was commissioned to build a statue of her, mid-headbutt, hooves raised in what he called an eternal gesture of civic engagement. It now stands in the middle of the central square, often dressed in seasonal hats. You ask how the goat became tied to the first island constitution. Theodora smirks. Oh, that came later, after the cucumber. Ah, yes, the cucumber. It happened during a particularly tense summer, when the island's first real attempt at codifying governance was underway. Delegates gathered under a great canvas tent, armed with ink, quills, and a communal jug of suspiciously fermented grape juice. Someone, history is vague on who, brought a cucumber to the table for lunch. Another someone thought it looked too symmetrical and claimed that such unnatural perfection indicated mainland influence. Accusations of agricultural elitism followed. So a third party weighed in, arguing that cucumbers grown without blemish should be taxed extra, as their beauty intimidated average produce. Within an hour, the conversation had spiraled into a full-blown identity crisis. If we can't agree on cucumbers, how can we ever write laws together? The founding assembly split down the middle, pro-cuke versus natural bumpers. One delegate, clearly exhausted and possibly tipsy, proposed the island's first true compromise. Let every citizen vote. Do we allow symmetrical cucumbers into our markets, or do we preserve the nobility of the crooked kind? And so the first democratic vote took place, Not on land distribution, not on rights of speech or trial, but on vegetable aesthetics. The result? Crooked cucumbers won by a narrow margin. Their victory was celebrated with a parade, 2 pickling contests, and the ceremonial slicing of a particularly wobbly specimen. The defeated pro-cuke faction accepted the results begrudgingly and added a clause to the Constitution that read, "No law shall pass unless it has first been argued over something slightly ridiculous," and thus the tradition of absurd preambles began. Since then, every major law on the island has been introduced, with a warm-up debate involving food, fashion, or farm animals. They call it the disarming ritual, designed to make sure people don't take themselves too seriously before trying to govern others. For example, the tax code was preceded by a 3-hour argument over whether yawning with flair should be considered a public performance. A new trade agreement was launched after resolving a critical question. Can a snail be considered late, or is it just early in a different way? A judicial reform bill was nearly scrapped when someone introduced a motion to require judges to wear mismatched sandals as a symbol of moral ambiguity. You stroll through the legislative garden, where stone tablets stand in a spiral formation, each inscribed with one of these preambles. Tourists love it. They think it's satire. You read aloud, "Before enacting maritime safety regulations, the council debated the emotional needs of sea urchins and whether they preferred jazz or silence. Before banning public spitting, a citizen demonstrated 12 historically accurate spitting techniques. Only 2 were approved for museum display. One tablet has a small plaque, still under review, contains traces of metaphor. You're about to leave when you hear chanting, soft, melodic, slightly off-key. You follow the sound to a nearby amphitheater, where a group of elders in pastel robes is rehearsing a new method of lawmaking, choral proclamation. One of them spots you and waves. Want to help us test Article 89? You nod, not entirely sure what that means, but sit anyway. The lead elder clears her throat and sings, "All boats must now carry a whistle." Another adds, "To summon dolphins or declare." Distress, a third croons, though summoning dolphins for friendship is discouraged. You clap politely. They bow. Turns out the idea is that laws sung aloud are harder to ignore and marginally more fun to remember. There's even discussion of a civic musical, where the zoning regulations are presented as a romantic duet between a farmer and a lighthouse keeper. You head down to the port, where another civic experiment is underway. The Mirror Court. Here, all walls and even the judge's bench are covered in reflective surfaces. The theory? No one lies well while watching their own face. A trial is in session. The accused stands sheepishly beside a cracked bronze mirror. The charge? Repeated violations of the Public Footwear Philosophy Ordinance, which insists that sandals must reflect one's emotional terrain. His crime? Socks with sandals. 2 days in a row. The judge, a woman with a voice like melted butter and judgmental eyebrows, rules that he must write a poetic explanation for his choices and recite it to a council of cobblers. If it moves at least one to tears, his penalty will be lifted. You ask a nearby spectator if this kind of court is common. Not really, she says, but the island's been trying new formats every month. Next week, we're testing a trial by interpretive dance. You nod, because of course you are. As the afternoon wanes, you find a quiet bench by the cliff's edge, the sea stretching out like an open book written in ink that smudges on purpose. You reflect on all the strange, beautiful mechanisms this little island has built, not to dominate or impress, but to explore fairness like an ever-changing recipe. And you wonder, maybe that's the point of democracy here. Not perfection, but play, like a child stacking smooth stones. Each law another pebble, balanced, odd-shaped, likely to wobble, but always, always placed with care. The breeze picks up. Below you, in the square, a puppet show has begun about the first time someone tried to legislate cloud shapes. It failed, obviously. Tomorrow you'll hear about how the island manages leadership without elections, why shouting is regulated only by time of day, and what happened during the infamous Midnight Charter meltdown. But for now, just sit. Let the last of the sun soak into your skin. Let the island's strange wisdom hum low in your bones. Let your thoughts drift like uneven cucumbers, slightly ridiculous, but unmistakably yours. You wake to bells, not church bells or alarm bells, but something more intimate. Tiny ones strung along the collars of municipal goats, who apparently moonlight as street sweepers. They trot past your window, tails flicking, hooves gently brushing the cobbled alleys. Each wears a sash that says Civic Hygiene Volunteer and seems proud of it. You, in contrast, are wearing yesterday's tunic and an expression of mild confusion. Today's agenda? Leadership, or rather, the complete and deliberate absence of it. You shuffle into the square with a lukewarm fig pastry in hand, watching as townsfolk gather beneath the great awning. A faded patchwork canopy stitched from retired sails and, reportedly, 2 wedding dresses no one claimed. A teenager is yelling at a fishmonger. A baker is tap dancing next to a policy scroll, and in the center of it all, a podium stands empty. That's the first thing you notice. No one's in charge. The second? No one seems to mind. You find a seat beside a man carefully embroidering a phrase onto his sleeve. Rotational authority is hot. He explains between stitches. We don't elect leaders. We borrow them. On this island, power isn't seized. Voted on or inherited, it's reluctantly accepted like the last slice of eggplant at a dinner party. Everyone's expected to serve a turn in public office, chosen not by popularity or ambition, but by lottery, not a metaphorical one. An actual lottery. Each morning, the island's official randomization council convenes to draw lots from the jar of mild destiny. It's a large ceramic pot, painted with swirling snails and slightly disappointed stars. The jar is housed in a secure cabinet beneath the bakery, because apparently that's where all important things live here, next to flour and existential bread. Debates. Today you watch as the new roles are drawn. Keeper of lamps, an 8-year-old boy who giggles with every duty announcement, arbiter of spoons. A retired pirate, toothless and gentle, who solemnly vows to never again let a ladle divide. Us. City speaker for the day? A woman who sells onions and clearly didn't expect to win. She accepts the role with a long sigh and an extra scarf. You ask the nearest official, a man polishing a bell, what happens if someone refuses their assignment. He shrugs. Nothing. But then you're on tea duty for a month and your name gets painted in lowercase on the village wall of cautionary tales. You take a detour to that wall later. Here it's mostly names like Dionysia, who faked a rash, and Stephanos, who just didn't show up. Next to each is a doodle of a disappointed goat. Apparently shame is gentler here, quiet, almost playful. Back in the Agora, the new city, speaker begins her address by coughing twice and muttering, "Let's make this quick, I've got onions to slice." She raises a scroll and reads from the day's civic prompts, suggested by citizens and filtered for relevance, clarity, and comedy potential. Item 1. Should the bell schedule be adjusted to reflect seasonal feelings? Item 2. Is it legal to marry a metaphor? Item 3. A proposal to rename alleyways based on what they smell like. You half expect laughter, but everyone listens. Murmurs of consideration drift through the crowd. One woman strokes her chin and says, Garlic Breeze Lane has a certain romance. The city speaker doesn't vote. No one does. Not today. Because today is a consensus day. A slower, older form of governance where talking is the decision. Discussions continue until something like a shared hum forms. Not agreement, but alignment. It's infuriatingly vague and weirdly effective. You follow the group to a shaded garden called the Round Listening. It's shaped like a spiral shell and lined with stone benches. In the center, a speaking vine is in bloom. No, really. It grows up a metal frame and is considered sacred. Anyone holding one of its leaves has the floor. When they finish, they place the leaf in a nearby bowl of olive oil. The symbolism is dense. The process is slower than paint contemplating itself, but you begin to notice something. People aren't arguing to win. They're adding. One old man begins with, "In my youth, bells rang 4 times. I liked it." Another adds, "But now, children nap at the 3rd. A teenager says, "We could use songs instead. Songs are just." And a shy woman, barely above a whisper, suggests, or silence, bells are loud, let feelings ring, it's poetry. Government by murmured haiku. You wonder how anything gets done this way. Then you realize it's not about doing quickly. It's about belonging deeply. Later that afternoon, the island's only building with actual columns, slightly crooked ones, hosts a leadership debrief. Outgoing office holders gather to whisper feedback into clay jars labeled helpful, too loud, and smelled weird. These jars are not read by a committee. They're buried under the reflective olive tree, whose fruit is said to taste faintly of bureaucracy and lemon. You sit beneath it with a woman named Callista, who once served as chief harmonizer during the Two Soup uprising. She explains, no one here wants to lead forever, that's the point. Authority has to keep moving, like wind or gossip or a sneeze in a crowded sauna. You ask what happens during emergencies. Surely, someone takes control, she smiles. Of course, we panic together. When needed, the island invokes the Oh No protocol, which temporarily suspends random leadership and assigns decisions to whoever's holding the emergency bell, which is passed hand to hand until the crisis ends or the bell gets too sweaty to hold. During the last fire, the bell ended up with a child who directed people calmly while eating grapes. A historian later wrote, "It was the island's most efficient disaster." Possibly because no one wanted to disappoint the grape boy. There's a certain softness here to power, a gentleness sharpened only by ritual and expectation. You notice that the titles themselves are deliberately silly. Supreme Keeper of E. Leftovers, Minister of Tent Recalibration, Temporal Wizard of Tuesday. They're not mocking government, they're disarming it, making sure no one forgets that it exists to serve, not impress. As dusk falls, you join a ceremony called the letting down of the day. A simple tradition. Everyone names something they almost accomplished and then forgives themselves out loud. Nearly mended the roof, one man says. I thought about apologizing, another offers. You're nudged gently. Your turn. You think for a moment. I meant to understand democracy, you say. Everyone nods, like you just recited a sacred koan. Afterward, they hand you a cup of lukewarm wine and a stone painted with the words close enough. You clutch it as the sky turns violet, the stars blinking on like ideas. Tomorrow you'll explore the island's whisper courts, where volume affects verdicts, and their annual Festival of Collective Regret, which somehow involves jellyfish, lanterns and apology scrolls. But tonight, you lie back on a woven mat that smells of lavender and old books, listening to the goat's bells fade into stillness. And you wonder, maybe real leadership isn't about charisma or certainty. Maybe it's about showing up, even when you're reluctant, especially then, especially with sandals on the wrong feet, and a speech in your pocket you didn't mean to write. You close your eyes and let the silence vote you into sleep. You wake to the sound of murmurs, not gossip, not argument, just the gentle susurration of voices trying not to be heard. It's court day, and in this democracy, justice isn't shouted from marble steps or banged into submission with a gavel. No. Here, disputes are settled the old-fashioned way, by whisper. You follow a thin trail of pine needles that leads you uphill to a grove of trees shaped like upside-down question marks. Nestled among them is a clearing ringed with low stone benches and shaded by woven reeds. This is the Whisper Court. You almost miss it. It looks more like a picnic that forgot its food. The accused and the accuser sit across from each other in chairs shaped like ears. Yes, literal ears, carved from wood complete with lobe armrests and swirled backrests. They face a central podium upon which rests the whisper stone, smooth, egg-sized, and reportedly warm to the touch. A small sign reads, "Speak with care." The rock remembers tone. You settle in beside a man who hands you a listening hood, a soft felt cone that narrows sound to the faintest hum. So no one cheats, he explains. Volume matters. You raise an eyebrow, but slip the hood over. Your head. The world goes dim, muffled like underwater breathing. A dispute is underway. A woman is accusing her neighbor of inconsiderate zucchini placement. Apparently, his garden has expanded by exactly 1 zucchini length into her shade zone. He responds by whispering into a reed cone, That's not encroachment, that's enthusiasm. The court, such as it is, listens silently. No judge, no jury. Just 30 or so villagers, each holding a small pebble polished smooth by decades of deliberation. When both parties finish, a hush falls, deeper than silence. You could hear a plum wrinkle. Then, one by one, listeners step forward and place their pebble in one of two bowls, grain of truth or slightly wrong. There is no winner, just balance, correction, a whispered realignment. The accused turns to the accuser. Next time, he whispers, I'll plant in a diagonal. She nods, satisfied, with zucchini courtesy. And just like that, justice is done. No punishment, no paperwork, just a gentle push toward empathy. You spend the morning watching other cases unfold, a dispute over shared chickens, your hen taught mine to sass, a disagreement about hammock. Proximity, snoring is not ambience. An accusation of unlicensed ghost gossip. You told the ghost I was boring. Each is resolved with murmured admissions, soft laughter, and the clink of pebbles into consensus. One case involves a baker who accidentally baked a legal document into a pie. The council rules it technically delicious and sentences her to repeat the error with different contracts. You finally ask someone, why whisper? A woman with silver thread in her hair answers, because loudness isn't truth. It's just noise. When you whisper, you have to mean it. You have to lean in. You try it later, just to test. You whisper to a child beside you, I don't understand any of this. He whispers back, good. That means it's working. After court adjourns, marked by a collective hum like bees dreaming, you walk down to the reflection pool. It's not water, but polished stone. People sit around it and say aloud what they almost said in court, but didn't. I wanted to scream, one man admits. I almost lied about the goat, says another. I considered throwing a zucchini, whispers the woman from earlier. This is considered honorable. The things you don't say are part of the record too. You rest beside an old man sketching everyone's shoes. Because that's the only part of a person they don't lie with, he murmurs. He gestures to yours. Yours say, confused, curious, maybe slightly damp, which is alarmingly accurate. In the afternoon, you attend a workshop called Restraint, through architecture. It's hosted in a hall where the acoustics punish yelling. Any raised voice is redirected straight back at the speaker, doubled in volume and layered with ghostly echo. You test it by saying hello a bit too loudly. Immediately you hear back, hello, oh, 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 followed by what sounds like a judgmental sheep. See? The guide smiles. This building teaches tone. Apparently, all public buildings on the island are designed to encourage specific behaviors. The library's walls absorb gossip. The marketplace bounces compliments like sunlight. The temple of contemplation only lets in your footsteps, not your voice. Even the public toilets whisper encouragement through slanted vents. You're doing great. As evening falls, you're invited to a storytelling session called Heard But Not Overheard. It's held in a half-underground chamber with walls made of reeds and moss. Everyone takes turns sharing their most misheard life moments. Thought she said she loved clams, one woman laughs. I misheard a prophecy and ended up inventing soup, another shrugs. I was once told to leave the goat, but I brought a goat. Whole different outcome. They laugh softly. Then someone asks you to share. You hesitate but whisper, I thought democracy was about arguing until someone gave up. Everyone nods, like you've uttered an ancient riddle. One man, eyes closed, says, no, it's about whispering until someone understands. You leave feeling lighter, or perhaps just more tuned in. As the stars emerge overhead, villagers begin a final ritual, the echo offering. Each person finds a quiet space, whispers into a clay jar, and then seals it. The jars are stored in a small cave until next year's listening festival, when they're opened and replayed. Some hopeful, some angry, some just curious. You kneel beside your own empty jar, fingers cool against the rim. You lean in. What do you whisper? Maybe it's something simple. Maybe it's, I was here, I tried. Maybe it's, this was softer than I expected. You close the lid gently, Tomorrow they'll take you to the argument docks where the sea settles debates. You'll meet the council of sleepwalkers who judge night behavior and learn why everyone fears the loud festival held once a decade and immediately regret it. But tonight you return to your room beneath the fig tree, the air thick with pine and calm. You listen to your own breath for a while, soft and steady, like justice, like understanding, like someone leaning close just to hear what you don't say. The sea is louder today. Not crashing, not angry, just louder than yesterday, like it too has something to say. Maybe it's caught wind of your presence. Maybe it's trying to prepare you. Because today, you're heading toward the argument docks. You wake with the smell of smoked salt on your pillow. It's not unpleasant. Kind of like eating French fries near a campfire. Your blankets tangled around your legs, a soft cocoon of last night's dreams. Somewhere in the distance, a heron coughs or clears its throat. You're not sure which is worse. Outside, the sky is peach-colored, like the gods tried painting it blue but spilled tea instead. You walk toward the coast, following a trail of argument stones. These are smooth, flat pieces of slate, etched with phrases once shouted by real villagers. Things like, "That was my goat." You can't borrow time, it's not a spoon. Just because the wind agrees with you doesn't mean you're right. They're laid out like breadcrumbs from past fury, leading you to the shore. The argument docks stretch into the sea like a stubborn tongue. Built from cedar wood and anchored by coral baskets, it's not meant for fishing or trading. It's meant for venting. Here, when two people reach the end of patience or diplomacy, they take it to the sea. Because the sea, they say, is the only thing patient enough to hear both sides. You arrive just as two older villagers are preparing to argue. One wears a scarf with embroidered bees. The other has a nose so sunburned it should be declared a national monument. Their names, you never learn them. Here, names are irrelevant during dock disputes. Each holds a conch shell. They stand at opposite ends of the dock. A bell is rung, and then, in perfect rhythm, they begin to shout, one at a time. Not at each other, at the sea. I never agreed to that fencing schedule. You said Tuesday, your goat heard you. Their voices bounce over the water, carried out by gulls and wind. Every few phrases, they pause and dunk the conch shell into the water. Symbolically, this is called cooling the heat. Practically, it's a good way to stop people from overheating. You sit on the edge of the dock, feet dangling above the waves, and watch as the sea swallows their fury. No echoes return, no mocking gulls. Just the crash and fizz of argument turned into salt. A boy beside you whispers, "They'll be friends by lunch." You raise an eyebrow, he nods. You can't stay mad when the ocean babysits your anger. Apparently, if either party tries to win the argument, the sea punishes them. Subtly, of course, one might find seaweed in their shoes for a week, or develop a persistent itch that only goes away when apologizing. Some say the sea here is mildly sentient. Others say it's just a very old tradition with really good PR. Either way, people respect it. After the dispute ends, both parties bow, not to each other, but to the sea. Then they share a lemon tart and walk home together, discussing mussel migration patterns like nothing ever happened. You're invited to try. You decline, at first. But then you think about it. What would you yell into the sea? What old resentment? What minor betrayal disguised as a joke? What unresolved 3 a.m. conversation from years ago? You step forward. The villagers don't cheer. They just make space. You hold the conch, feel its cool ridges in your palm and shout, "I wasn't ready." It echoes once, then disappears, then softer. "But I tried." A wave laps against the dock as if to say, "We know." The next ritual surprises you. It's called the drift. Each person places a small wooden carving into the water, some shaped like hands, others like musical notes or abstract squiggles. Each represents a feeling they no longer want to carry. You're handed one shaped like a tangled knot. You let it go. It bobs for a moment, then floats away, joining dozens of others on a journey to the deep shelf, where supposedly nothing can return to haunt you. You don't believe in magic, but you do believe in the weight that lifts when something heavy stops being yours alone. Later, you're shown the archive of arguments. It's not what you expect. Not dusty scrolls or shouting statues. It's a garden. Each plant represents a long-resolved disagreement. The lemon tree grew from a debate about sourness. The twisted olive shrub came from a centuries-old quarrel about cooking oil ratios. There's even a vine named Petty. That only flowers when someone tries to revisit an already settled argument. The caretaker, a woman in bright orange socks, explains that each plant only grows if both sides eventually softened. No growth without give, she says, brushing soil from her hands. You run your fingers over a leaf. It's cool, waxy, and smells faintly of apology. In the afternoon, there's a short play performed by the children of the village called The Last Argument. In it, two characters argue so long that they forget what they were fighting about. They build a tower out of reasons, climb to the top, and realize they're alone. The play ends with them dismantling the tower, stone by stone, and using the rubble to make a table instead. You clap quietly. The child beside you whispers, "We perform it every year, in case adults forget." As dusk settles, the villagers gather for a final exercise. The listening walk. Everyone pairs up with someone they've disagreed with. Today, last year, or maybe just quietly disliked for no clear reason. They walk the coastal path in silence, side by side, no talking, just listening to the other's breath, pace, the rhythm of feet on gravel. You're paired with a woman who once sneezed in your soup. You didn't say anything at the time, but now you walk together under the lavender sky, and it's enough. No apologies needed. Just the steady music of coexistence. At the end of the path, you both pick up smooth stones and add them to a pile known as the Maybe Later Rock Garden. This is where unresolved feelings go to nap. Not gone, not buried, just resting. And maybe for tonight that's enough. You return to your fig-scented room, the window open to the hush of tide and moonlight. You feel calmer, maybe not healed, but smoothed, like a pebble rolling in surf. Tomorrow you'll meet the sleepwalkers, those strange villagers who govern by dream, and witness their night council, where decisions are made in a state of semi-consciousness. But for now the air is warm, the world is hushed. You lie back, you breathe, you whisper nothing at all, and even that feels heard. The dream starts before you fall asleep. It's strange how that works on this island, like time bends to local customs. One moment, you're brushing crumbs from your bedsheet. The next, you're standing in the middle of a marble courtyard lit only by moonlight, barefoot and wrapped in a soft woolen robe that wasn't there a minute ago. Someone hands you a cup of warm fig milk and whispers, "It's time." Time for what? For the night council. Because on this island, this tiny democracy wedged between wine-dark seas and echoing cliffs, some decisions are simply too important to be made while fully awake. The logic goes something like this. Your daytime brain is full of ego, pride, plans, and spreadsheets. Your dream mind, however, that one listens to poetry, to shadows, to the sighs between syllables. So every full moon the council meets while dreaming. And tonight, you're invited. You follow a line of villagers, all moving slowly, wrapped in sleep robes and half-lidded smiles. A few snore gently as they walk. One mumbles something about soup recipes and betrayal. Another is holding a rock like a baby. You pass through a narrow arch carved with the words, "Let all logic be drowsy." Inside the council chamber, there are no chairs, just woven nests made of feathers and driftwood arranged in a circle. You curl into one, knees tucked, fig milk in hand. The room smells like lavender, parchment, and just a hint of seaweed. A bell chimes once, then twice. The meeting begins. No one speaks right away. Instead, they breathe together. Inhale, hold, exhale, like waves. Then the chief sleepwalker clears her throat. She's an older woman with a braid long enough to be mistaken for a rope ladder. Her voice is warm fog. "Tonight's dream," she murmurs, "concerns the placement of a public bench." You blink. That's it? A bench? But the council leans in as if she's just declared war, because placement is everything here. A bench by the bakery means gossip. A bench by the cliffs invites brooding. One by the goat field means, well, you'll probably get headbutted. The villagers begin to drift into dream state. You watch, fascinated, as they speak with eyes closed, voices slow and fluid. I dreamed the bench was under a fig tree, one says, but the fig spoke Latin and complained. Another murmurs, it must face west, toward the regrets. A younger man stands and proclaims, the bench wants to be alone. And someone whispers, let it. It's absurd, it's beautiful. You start to see the bench, not as wood and nails, but as an emotional compass. A metaphorical invitation, a symbol of collective posture. By the end of the dream meeting, no decision is made. And that's okay, because part of the process is letting the idea sleep too. You return to your nest as the council disbands, each member leaving silently, their faces calm. It's not until morning that a plank of wood appears near the fig tree, inscribed with, reserved for future rest. No one claims credit. It just happens. Later that day, a villager named Oreos tells you about the deliberate dozing tradition. Every Friday afternoon, the community agrees to take synchronized naps. Not because they're tired, though they are, but because sleep is considered a civic duty. Clear minds make better choices, Oreos yawns, handing you a small lavender pillow. Plus, most arguments look silly in dreams. You lie in a hammock strung between two lemon trees. Above you, cloth flags flutter lazily. One reads, democracy naps now. The sounds around you soften. Bees grumble. Someone's sandals slap. The cobblestones like applause, and the distant sea hiccups a wave. You dream of the bench again. This time it offers you advice. You don't sit to rest, it says. You sit to notice. Later that evening, the villagers gather for the snooze ballot. Here's how it works. Each person writes down a decision they're struggling with, not big political ones, but small personal quandaries. Should I forgive Thanos for eating my last olive? Is it time to admit I can't play the lyre? What if I never finish my lemon poem? They fold the papers into tiny origami pillows and place them on a floating tray made of reeds and salt wax. At midnight, the tray is pushed into the tide. They call it letting the sea decide what matters by dawn. You can't help but laugh. This can't possibly work, you mutter. But the next morning, the sea returns 3 pillows. Only 3. The rest? Gone, devoured, dissolved, irrelevant. The 3 chosen ones are read aloud. They're discussed kindly, as if the entire village is your therapist's waiting room. No one scoffs, no one interrupts. People nod, sigh, share stories. One older woman stands to declare, I will indeed stop pretending to like anchovies. Applause follows. The villager named Thanos gives a dramatic apology for the olive incident, complete with fake tears and a musical number. You don't even know who wrote the lemon poem dilemma, but somehow you're rooting for them. Some facts you pick up over fig tea. The island once banned alarm clocks after a series of accidental revolts. A law exists stating that any decision made after 3 consecutive sleepless nights must be tucked in and re-evaluated post-dream. The village constable is also the head napper. Her badge is a velvet eye mask. You begin to wonder, what would your world look like if more decisions were made half asleep? Would people be gentler? Would anger forget why it started? Would the bench finally feel understood? The chief sleepwalker invites you back for the next session. You ask what the topic will be. She shrugs. Depends what the island dreams. Before bed, you walk to the edge of the cliffs. The stars blink sleepily overhead. The sea is quieter tonight. Listening. You breathe in fig, salt, and the sleepy hush of collective stillness. Tomorrow, you'll explore the marketplace where truth is bartered and lies are kept in glass jars for artistic purposes. But for now, close your eyes. Let your logic loosen. Let your breath slow. Let the bench hold your questions. And maybe, just maybe, let yourself decide nothing at all. The sun today rises reluctantly, like someone who hit snooze one too many times. Its light stretches slowly across the terracotta rooftops, spills into alleyways, still damp with dew, and finally lands on your face, warm, buttery, insistent. You blink, then groan. Your pillow smells like lemon rind and crushed thyme, and your legs are tangled in a sheet that seems to have ambitions of becoming a toga. You sit up, still half in dream, and remember the chief sleepwalker's promise. That today you'll visit the marketplace, not just any market, the Agora of Whispers. It's tucked in a shallow valley that hums with bees and scandal. A place where villagers don't just sell fish and olives, They trade stories, testimony, confessions, and if you're brave or foolish, outright lies. You follow the smell of fried fennel and goat cheese through a maze of sun-washed lanes. The market unfurls before you like a woven rug. Stalls made of driftwood, shaded by faded sails, decorated with coral charms and dried octopus. But here's the twist. There is no money. Everything is bartered with truths. Want a fresh fig tart? Tell the baker a secret from your childhood. Need a clay water jug? You'd better be ready to admit who you regret not kissing during the harvest festival. You're told this system emerged centuries ago during the copper coin crisis, when the island's economy collapsed under the weight of counterfeit currency made entirely out of painted snail shells. One clever grandmother suggested they try something harder to fake: honesty. It stuck. You start walking, hands behind your back, soaking it all in. A stall sells second-hand memories, each bottled in tiny glass flasks. Another hawks loose intentions, stored in folded parchment. The herbalist offers tea that makes guilt taste like lavender. You pause at a stand marked misremembered events slightly embellished. An old man grins at you with 2 teeth and says, "Tell me a lie you once believed, and I'll give you a beautiful version of something that never happened." You admit you once thought thunder was the sound of clouds fighting over bedtime. He nods solemnly, hands you a scroll. It reads, "You once rode a dolphin into a thunderstorm and came back speaking fluent Heron. You treasure it." Nearby, a small crowd gathers around the sifter of truths. She's perched on a tall stool veiled in blue netting and listens carefully as people offer statements. "I saw Irenaeus steal figs. Thalia loves me but pretends she doesn't. The well is cursed." Each time she closes her eyes, tilts her head, and murmurs either, "Hold on to that," or "Let it go." No one argues with her. Some truths apparently need not be proven, only named. You pass a booth labeled "Truths You Can't Say Out Loud." The shopkeeper, a woman with ink-stained fingers, gives you a warm smile. "No speaking," she says. "Write it down, burn it, then choose your reward." You write slowly, carefully. You don't tell us what it is. That's between you and the smoke. You watch your paper curl into ash. In return, she gives you a small stone. It's cool, smooth, and somehow heavier than expected. You'll know when to use it, she says, already turning to the next customer. Further down, a commotion stirs. 2 villagers are locked in a playful shouting match near the Liar's Circle, an open arena marked by concentric rings of cracked marble. The rules are simple. Participants take turns telling lies, not just fibs, good lies. Inventive ones. The crowd votes with pebbles, smooth for delightful lies, jagged for boring ones. One contestant declares, "I once milked a volcano and made flaming yogurt." Another boasts, "The stars only shine because I pay them in compliments." You can't stop laughing, but then a hush falls over the crowd as a thin man steps into the center ring. He raises one finger and says, "My lie is that I am content." Silence. Then someone sobs. Then slowly, one by one, smooth pebbles roll toward his feet. You feel that one, deeply. The agora of whispers is not all lightness. Some stalls are heavy, somber. You find one woman who sells regrets, each one wrapped, in linen and labeled with names and dates. "I keep them," she says, "so others don't have to." You ask if you can leave one. She nods, offers you a quill and says, "Make it short. Regrets don't like long stories." You write only 4 words. She doesn't read them. Just folds the linen, kisses it once, and places it gently into a basket. You walk away lighter. A fact drifts through your memory like steam. During the island's brief attempt at a written constitution, Article 7 required all citizens to confess a personal contradiction during their annual tax filing. The result? The tax rate dropped. But civic empathy skyrocketed. Historians still argue whether the law was a stroke of genius or the byproduct of an island-wide wine festival gone philosophical. Some say the agora system is wildly inefficient, but inefficiency here is a kind of poetry, a way to slow down the act of choosing. And if democracy is the process of making decisions together, then the real point is not the speed, but the feeling that you were heard. Even if your voice cracked, even if your truth was strange, especially then you find a bench, yes, that bench, and sit for a moment. Someone's carved into the wood. Lie to me tenderly. You smile. Behind you, two teenagers argue over whether bees should vote. A child is giving a speech to a chicken. A very elegant woman is selling sarcasm in small jars. You sit until the light begins to soften again, until the sky shifts from bronze to lavender. Your pocket holds a scroll that isn't true, a stone you don't understand, and a strange calm in your chest you hadn't noticed until now. Tomorrow you'll travel up the hill to the temple of forgotten laws, a place where rules go when no one enforces them anymore. But for now, let the air grow still. Let the fig trees sigh. Let your truths and lies rest quietly together, like old friends who no longer need to talk. The path up to the temple begins with a lie, or maybe it's just a local prank. But either way, the sign nailed to the olive tree at the fork in the road definitely says, "Shorter route this way, only 17 steps." You, of course, believe it, because you're optimistic, or maybe sleep-deprived, or maybe both. 17 steps later, you find yourself knee-deep in sagebrush, climbing a hill so steep it has its own personality. The rocks underfoot whisper complaints. Your lungs stage a protest. Your thighs declare secession, but somehow the air up here tastes like rosemary and possibility. You crest the final ridge just as the sky opens its arms wide, revealing a plateau bathed in gold, strewn with wildflowers and the scattered bones. Of rules no one follows anymore. There it stands, the temple of forgotten laws. From a distance it looks like a ruin, but the closer you get, the more you realize it's deliberately crumbling. Its columns lean in slightly, like gossiping old women. Its roof has holes in all the right places, perfect for moonlight and metaphor, and carved across the lintel in letters barely legible. Only what is remembered matters, but what is forgotten shapes us too. You step through the doorway. Immediately, the scent hits you. Old parchment, sea salt, and a strange hint of orange peels long since dried. The floor is a mosaic of half-sentences, unfinished edicts, abandoned slogans, lost declarations of affection that someone once shouted at a town. Council meeting. The high priest here is a man named Diodoros, but everyone calls him the librarian of laws. He wears a tunic stitched with clauses, literally. Bits of legal code are embroidered along the sleeves. Article 12.3. No citizen shall own more than 3 goats unless the goats agree to it. He greets you with a nod and hands you a scroll. You unroll it carefully. It reads, "You are now temporarily bound by Rule 4, speak in questions only." You stare at him. Is this serious? He smiles. Why wouldn't it be? What if I break the rule? Is that what you really want? You both grin. He leads you through the main chamber. This is where the laws live, not the ones that still matter, the ones they follow in courts and councils. No, these are the oddballs, the misfits, the rules that were too specific, too idealistic, too poetic, or just plain weird. Diodoros points to a stone tablet half buried in sand. All declarations of love must be sung, off-key, and accompanied by hand gestures. A favorite from the age of soft hearts. Next to it, a fragment of a law etched on seashells. All fishmongers must recite a poem before noon or risk forfeiting their fish. And a scroll pinned to the wall with a rusted hairpin. If 2 citizens wear the same color tunic on the same day, they must duel with compliments until one cries. You ask him, quietly, "Did people actually follow these?" He laughs softly. "Only sometimes. That's what made them beautiful. And here comes the weird truth no one tells you. Some of these laws were never meant to be enforced. They were expressions of yearning, of who the people wished they could be. Like the one carved in purple ink on marble. All arguments must begin with, 'I see your point,' where they tried that rule for 3 months. It failed spectacularly. But those were the most peaceful 3 months in the island's history. There's one particularly large column wrapped in vines. You brush them aside to read what's inscribed. No law shall remain in place longer than the memory of the oldest. Villager, you blink. That's why we built this, Diodoros explains. To hold the forgotten but not to revive them. He tells you the island once attempted the Great Law Purge, a mass retirement of every rule older than 50 years. The result? Chaos. People started doing things like driving goats inside libraries and wearing togas backward on Wednesdays, so they struck a compromise. They wouldn't erase the laws. They'd just house them here, in this temple, like elderly relatives who still tell great stories but no longer drive. You notice a section called Laws that only applied to one person. For example, until further notice, Leonidas the Loud shall refrain from shouting during pottery class, and Althea must stop feeding the mayor's parrot brandy. There's even a stone that reads simply, Rule 46. No. No context, just no. Diodoros admits that rule is still occasionally cited during village meetings, often accompanied by vigorous nodding and no further explanation. You come across an alcove filled with laws written in invisible ink. Why? You ask. He shrugs. Some truths can only be read when you're ready. One tile is warm to the touch. You press your palm against it, and faint letters appear. Be softer with yourself. Even laws crack under pressure. Oof. Direct hit. The. Wind slips through a broken shutter. Outside, the light has taken on that end-of-day glow, the kind that turns everything to memory before it even ends. You ask Diodoros why he keeps these laws. They remind us that rules are people, he says. They're born from hope, fear, grief, and like people, sometimes they're beautiful disasters. He gives you a final gift before you leave, a law on a tiny piece of driftwood, small enough to fit in your pocket. It says, you may rest when the stars appear. It has no punishment clause, no enforcement mechanism, just permission. You tuck it away, already feeling its weight. Outside, you look back at the temple one more time. It seems older now, or maybe more alive. There's a sense that every rule, no matter how forgotten, still echoes somewhere in a gesture, a habit, a shared silence. Tomorrow you'll visit the village council chambers and sit in on a vote. But tonight, you walk down the hill slow. You let the rules stay behind, and you begin to wonder what gentle law your own breath might be writing into the world with every inhale. The council chamber smells like warm olives and resignation. That's the first thing you notice as you ease yourself onto the long wooden bench at the back, behind a local baker and someone who looks like they're here purely for the drama. The room is round, domed with pale limestone, and full of exactly the kind of soft echoes that make you feel like your every thought might accidentally become public record. In front of you, a circular table surrounded by 7 councillors, all of whom wear togas slightly wrinkled and very lived in. The oldest among them is asleep. No one minds. In fact, someone's quietly placing a folded cloth under his chin so he doesn't drool on the documents again. You have arrived on voting day. Not a big one. No debates over wars or grand policies or philosophical declarations. No. Today's vote is about figs, specifically whether the fig festival should be moved to early summer instead of mid-spring, because the figs seem confused this year, as one elderly farmer puts it. You'd laugh, but it's not funny. Not here. On this island, every vote matters, even if it's about fruit. And that's because this isn't just democracy. This is a particularly obsessive, beautifully overthought form of democracy that could only exist in a place this small, this proud, and this willing to argue over fig schedules, as if they were debating the rise and fall of empires. You lean forward. Someone clears their throat. Councillor Thales, tall and thin with a nose like a quill pen, speaks first. The trees have ripened early. Clearly, nature is asking us to reconsider our calendar. He sits down dramatically, as if he just delivered the final line in a tragedy. Councillor Melia shakes her head. Or maybe nature is testing us. If we move the festival, what's next? Pancakes in autumn? I say we hold the line. There is a low murmur. A few citizens nod. Someone scribbles on a wax tablet. And so it begins. The ritual of open deliberation, a practice rooted in the earliest days of the island's founding. You'd think it would be boring. And sometimes, yes, it absolutely is. But today, it's kind of mesmerizing. Here's how it works. Every citizen who wishes to speak may do so. They raise a hand, step forward, and offer their thoughts. The council listens, they take notes, they don't interrupt. Even the loud guy with the conspiracy theory about migratory figs gets a full 2 minutes. He finishes by shouting, "Coincidence or coordinated botanical sabotage?" There is silence. Then Councillor Damaris replies gently, "Sir, your passion is noted." Later, someone suggests a compromise. 2 festivals. One for the early figs, one for the late bloomers. There's a flutter of excitement. The room leans in, but Councillor Lysandros raises a cautionary hand. Have we considered the economic impact? Of doubling the fig allocation. He uses those exact words. You admire how seriously they take this. Even the absurd parts. And then you realize something. This isn't absurd to them, because every fig picked at the right time means more jam for winter, more coins in the purse, more joy at the table. Democracy here lives at the intersection of survival and community. It is slow, yes, but it is also alive. They vote. And no, there are no fancy machines or dramatic gavel bangs. Instead, each councillor places a pebble in one of 2 bowls, one carved with a fig leaf, the other with a small sun. One for staying put, the other for moving earlier. The fig leaf bowl wins. By 1 pebble. Just like that, the festival stays where it is. And that's when Councillor Irenaeus stands up. He's the youngest, probably mid-20s, with ink stains on his tunic and a nervous energy that suggests he's still getting used to public speaking. "I'd like to propose a new vote," he says. The room shifts. Heads tilt. "I think it's time we consider whether our council should have term limits." You sit up straighter. This is not a fig vote. You can almost hear a flock of metaphorical pigeons scatter from the rafters. Councillor Melia crosses her arms. "And why is that, young one?" Irenaeus swallows hard. "Because some of us," he glances at the still sleeping councillor, "have been here a long time. And while we honor their service, we must also honor the idea that leadership should rotate, so the people stay connected to power." It is a bold thing to say. The baker next to you lets out a low whistle. Term limits have never been formally discussed on the island. Power has always shifted gently via retirement or public pressure, but nothing codified, nothing binding. Councillor Thales strokes his beard. "Are you accusing us of clinging?" "No," says Irenaeus. "I'm asking us to evolve." There's a pause. Then Melia stands up again. "Let's vote then." But Damaris interrupts her. "No, not today. We must hold a public hearing. Allow citizens time to consider, to write, to speak." You look around the room. Some faces show surprise, others anticipation, and you remember something the librarian told you back in the Temple of Forgotten Laws. Even a small island needs to stretch sometimes, otherwise it forgets it has bones. The hearing is set for the next full moon, which means you have 12 nights to learn more about how power actually works here. Not just in council meetings, but in markets, kitchens, songs, because laws are only half the story. The rest, that lives in practice. Outside, the sun has slipped beneath the hills, staining the horizon with fig-colored light. A girl runs past, chasing a goat with a wreath of daisies around its neck. You're already forming questions, already imagining what voices might rise at the hearing, but for tonight you walk home slowly. The island exhales around you, and in your pocket, the driftwood law still rests quietly. You may rest when the stars appear. They're here now. And so, you do. You wake to the smell of seawater and garlic, drifting in through the open shutters like a rumor. Morning arrives on the island not with alarms, but with voices, women calling across rooftops, merchants setting up carts with the careful thuds of crates and baskets, the faint clinking of amphorae being jostled into place. It's market day, and today, you're not just here for olives, you have a hearing to prepare for. The fig vote may be over, but Councillor Irenaeus' bold proposal, term limits, has cracked open something deeper. You feel it in the way people talk to each other now, a subtle shift in tone. The baker no longer just asks whether the bread is too dry, he now asks who should decide when someone's time is up. The old fisherwoman, whose voice used to be reserved only for weather predictions, is now sharing opinions about institutional stagnation. The island is stretching its bones, and you, somehow, are caught in the sinew of it. You wander through the agora, the central square where transactions happen with coins, gossip, and passive-aggressive bartering. The air hums with the friction of 100 small decisions. To your left, a merchant haggles with a boy over a fish that looks more like a weapon than a meal. To your right, A group of elders sit under an olive tree, watching everything, commenting. On nothing until you get close. You going to that hearing? One of them asks, chewing something green and bitter looking. You nod. Good, another says. Someone's got to make sure Irenaeus doesn't turn the council into a revolving door. Another elder grunts. Or worse, into a stage for teenage philosophers. Their laughter is gravelly and warm, but not unkind. It reminds you that not everyone is thrilled by change, and really, who is? Especially on an island where the system works more or less if you're patient, polite, and know how to read a weathered facial expression across a room full of sandals. Still, the hearing looms. And in preparation, you've been sent to one of the most quietly powerful people on the island, Callista the Archivist. She doesn't live in the archives. That would be cliché. She lives on a terrace above them, with 4 cats, 17 potted herbs, and a view of the sea that looks stolen from a love poem. Her door creaks open before you even knock. You'll hear about the precedent, aren't you? She asks, as if this is the most obvious thing in the world. You blink. She waves you inside. Callista moves like a person who doesn't waste energy unless it's on something important. Her home smells like ink and citrus. Scrolls are tucked into niches. Some are sealed. Some are left slightly open, like they're eavesdropping. She hands you a cup of something warm and mildly threatening in color. I've seen 5 reform movements in my lifetime, she says, without preamble. 3 failed. 1 was absorbed. 1 turned into the theater festival. You sip the drink. It tastes like boiled rosemary and hidden agendas. Callista pulls out a worn scroll and spreads it on the table. This, she says, is from the time of the Tide Rebellion. Councillor Ajax proposed a yearly rotation of council members, said it would keep power fresh. You know what happened? You shake your head. They voted it down, but not because they hated the idea, because they feared no one else would volunteer. She taps the parchment. We are small, the same people show up year after year. It's not always about hoarding power. Sometimes it's just inertia. You sit back, letting the words settle. It's a truth you hadn't considered. On the mainland, sure, term limits are about breaking dynasties and flushing out corruption. But here it's about trust, continuity, the knowledge that when your neighbor gets elected, he still owes you 2 eggs and a ladder. Some changes, Callista says quietly, need scaffolding. Otherwise they collapse under their own novelty. She scribbles a note and hands it to you. Give this to Irenaeus. It's a name, someone he should talk to. You tuck the paper into your tunic, thank her, and step back into the bright, blinding noon. The island greets you with noise and wind. The sea hisses against the rocks like it's been holding in gossip all morning. Later that evening, you find Irenaeus at the amphitheater, staring at the empty seats like they've personally insulted him. You look like someone who just realized democracy has teeth, you say. He gives a wry smile. Or that my speech will probably be interrupted by a goat. You hand him the note. He reads it. His face changes. She kept this, he murmurs, then he looks at you. Do you want to speak at the hearing? You freeze. No pressure, he adds. Just, you've been here, listening. People notice that. You think about it. About the smell of figs, the laughter of the elders, the driftwood lore in your pocket. Maybe, you say. Maybe. The day of the hearing arrives with a sky like stretched linen and the scent of lemon oil rubbed onto benches. The council chamber is packed. Some people stand, others sit cross-legged. Children are perched in laps or along ledges. The air is charged. Councillor Thales opens the floor with the calm cadence of someone pretending not to be nervous. Then Irenaeus rises. His speech is short, not dramatic, but precise. He doesn't insult, doesn't accuse. He simply asks, what do we owe the next generation of leaders? The chance to step forward, or the burden of waiting forever for someone to move aside? You feel the ripple. He's done well. But the real hearing happens now in the voices that rise afterward. A teacher stands to say that change must be taught, not just declared. A fisherman worries that too many elections will confuse the elders. Merchant proposes a hybrid model, term limits but staggered ones to preserve continuity. And then someone calls your name. You didn't expect this, but your legs are moving. You stand at the center of the chamber and say the only thing that feels true. Sometimes a law isn't about fixing something broken. It's about reminding people that they can build, even if what they build doesn't look like what came before. A few nods, a few furrowed brows, but mostly silence. The good kind. The kind that says, people are thinking. By the time the hearing ends, no decision has been made, but something has begun. Outside, the stars are already nudging the sky into evening. You walk home slower than usual, your feet brushing against the dust of old paths and new questions, and somewhere behind you, Irenaeus. Ears speaking softly to an elder who once swore they'd never vote for reform. You can't hear what's being said, but the tone, it's curious. And curiosity on this island is the root of every law that ever stuck. Night on the island doesn't fall. It coils gently around you like a cat in search of a lap. The cicadas begin their soft, mechanical chorus, and the sea sounds closer somehow, like it's crept up the cliffs, just to whisper secrets to the olive trees. Lamps flicker to life one by one, with that warm golden glow that makes everyone look like a painting. You don't go home right away. Instead, your feet carry you toward the harbor. Maybe it's the adrenaline from speaking at the hearing, or maybe it's that strange, heady feeling of being part of something bigger, something still unnamed. Whatever the reason, the quiet of the waterfront draws you in like a lullaby. There, leaning against the prow of a weathered boat, is Mentes. He's eating honeyed almonds out of a small clay bowl and watching a lantern bob on the waves like it might have something to say. "You survived," he says without turning his head. "Barely," you reply. "You didn't trip," he shrugs. "Better than I expected." You sit beside him, letting the salt air sting your skin in that oddly pleasant way it does just after sunset. Everything smells like fish, rope, and a trace of rosemary from someone's late dinner. The hearing is over, but the fallout has only just begun. Already you've heard mutterings in the market. Shouldn't term limits mean more elections? Isn't that expensive? Who will run if no one wants to? Questions are like flies here. They gather the moment something sweet is spilled. "You know," Mentes says, popping another almond into his mouth, "there was a time we didn't vote on anything." You turn to look at him. He grins. "Well, not exactly nothing, but the council used to be appointed. One year, 3 brothers served together. Not because they were brilliant, just because their mother was persuasive and the council was tired." You blink. That explains a lot. Yep, Council of 3 bickering spoons, people called them. They never agreed on anything except cutting all speeches short. He chews reflectively, then adds, "That's when the citizens started to push back, not with protests. With stories, satire. One poet wrote a play where the council members were replaced by mildly enchanted goats." You snort. It brought the house down. Literally. The amphitheater roof collapsed that night. No one was hurt, but everyone took it as a sign. You laugh softly. The wind stirs the sea in long, slow spirals. It's a good night for remembering. Mentes grows quiet. Then, "This proposal? It won't go quietly. Some want change, some want permanence, and some want neither, but they really like arguing." You nod. You've met those people. "Thing is," he says, finishing his almonds, "laws don't just come from debates. They come from moments, small ones. Someone hesitates, someone laughs, someone leaves their front door open and invites a neighbor in." He stands and stretches, bones cracking like kindling. "Tomorrow the council will ask for volunteers to draft a formal version of the term limit proposal. If you're smart, you'll stay out of it." You raise an eyebrow. He winks. "If you're really smart, you'll join anyway." He walks off into the dark, leaving behind only the faint scent of almonds and a deeper kind of silence. The next morning, you're back at the council hall. The room is less crowded now. Just the committed, the curious, and the chronically nosy. The elders sit at the front, their robes slightly more wrinkled than usual. Someone's brought a pitcher of watered wine. Another councillor is passing around a basket of nuts. "Councillor Irenaeus has requested the formation of a working group," announces Thales. "We require no more than 5 members. Volunteers will be considered." "Yes, Phylon, even if you raise both hands." You raise one, so do 3 others. Irenaeus himself, the elderly spice merchant Mira, and somewhat unexpectedly, the local potter Ector. The fifth hand is slower to rise. It belongs to Leandros. Now, you haven't interacted much with Leandros, but you've heard things. Whispers that he speaks. Rarely, but when he does, people lean in. That he once negotiated a land dispute using only metaphor. That he knows more about the island's constitutional quirks than the island itself does. His eyes meet yours. There's a challenge there. Not aggressive, but sharp. This will be interesting. You gather later that afternoon in a small stone building near the archive. The table is too big for 5 people. Everything echoes. Irenaeus starts. I think we begin with 3 terms, each. 2 years. Renewable once after a break. Leandros frowns. Too prescriptive. What if no one else runs? Hector chimes in, brushing clay from his sleeves. Make it 3 terms maximum, but allow community override. If 70% of citizens vote for the same person again, let them serve. Mira coughs politely. And who checks the votes? I don't trust any system that relies on exact math. I've seen what happens when you mix wine and counting. You listen, and eventually you speak. Not often. But when you do, people nod. Hours pass like centuries. Tea is poured. Arguments bloom and wilt. A lizard watches from the window. Somewhere between Clause 5 and Clause 6, someone brings up a loophole from decades ago. Apparently, a former councillor once changed their name to run again after reaching their term limit. No one can confirm it, but everyone swears it happened. The identity fraud incident, Mira mutters. He wore a fake beard. His own mother voted against him. You can't help it, you laugh. They all do, even Leandros. It's the first time he smiles. Not long after, the draft takes shape. Messy, imperfect, but real. You agree on a structure. 3 terms maximum per person, each lasting 2 years. A 1-term break required before rerunning. Exception, a citizen vote of 70% or higher may override once every 10 years. All votes to be counted publicly, with citizen witnesses drawn by lot. It's not radical, but it's not cosmetic either. It breathes. When you leave, the sun is low. The air smells like dust, time, and just a hint of something new. That night you dream of columns made of driftwood, of laws carved into bread, of debates sung like lullabies, and in the background always the sea, listening. You return to the council hall under a sky the color of watered-down wine. It's early, too early, but you don't mind. The island always feels calmer just after sunrise, like it hasn't quite decided what kind of day it wants to be. You pass a few sleepy fishermen untangling nets, and one goat already making a break for the bakery. The working group's proposal is complete. It's written neatly in black ink on coarse paper, the title too grand for its contents. Proposal on the E. Regulation of council term durations and re-elections. No one calls it that. Around the village, people have already dubbed it the 3-timers law. You can't tell if it's affectionate or sarcastic. Today, the council will vote on whether to present it to the wider citizenry. Not a final decision, just a step toward. 1. But here, steps matter, especially when they echo across an island this small. You step into the hall. It smells like warm dust and old decisions. The crowd is small again. Most citizens are off tending to boats, shops, or their second breakfasts, but those who've come are the type who lean in when whispers turn to murmurs. Thales clears his throat. Thank you all for attending, he begins. The working group, of which I was not a part, but would like to remind everyone was my idea, has submitted their draft. He holds up the parchment like a recipe gone public. Today, we will discuss whether this draft should proceed to full citizen review with a vote to follow next week. I will now open the floor to comments. You brace for it, and sure enough, the floor speaks. First is old Nicandros, who once ran for council on a platform of fewer seagulls. He still hasn't forgiven the island for not electing him. I have read this proposal, he says, and while I appreciate the effort, I must ask, what happens if we run out of qualified people? Do we choose names from a hat? Or perhaps we draw lots from the fish market? Polite chuckles. You catch Leandros making a tally mark in the margin of his notes. You suspect it's a private game? How many times someone says "but what if" in a single session? Next is Alka, the midwife who has delivered more than half the island. I support the proposal, she says. We cannot fear change just because it is unfamiliar. I have delivered babies while their fathers fainted. We survived that. We can survive a little democracy. The room smiles. But the real moment comes when Damaris stands. She is not tall, not loud. But when she speaks, the room leans slightly toward her, as if caught by a current. I remember, she begins, when a councillor stayed in office for 12 years. 12. He stopped listening after year 6. After year 8 he stopped, showing up. Murmurs of agreement, and we let it happen, she continues, because we didn't have a rule against it. This proposal is not a punishment, it's a boundary. Boundaries keep things from becoming something else. She sits. Silence follows. Then Thales clears his throat again. Well said. Any further comments? A few, none as memorable. One man proposes adding a sunset clause. Another wants to exclude. Councillors who own goats. The goat lobby apparently is stronger than we thought. Finally, the vote. It passes. Barely. You feel it ripple through you. Not joy exactly, but relief and a little fear. Now it's real. It will go before the people. Next week. And that vote, that will be different because now it's not just debate. It's decision. After the session, you wander. Your feet find the market. A boy is selling figs. A woman is weaving baskets with her elbows for reasons unknown. A man is loudly arguing with a pigeon. Island life, as always, continues. But here and there you hear it whispers. The term law. Is it really happening? I heard it limits goats too. You think of something Mentes said. Laws don't just come from debates, they come from moments. Maybe this is one. The following days are strange. People begin to act like citizens again, not subjects, not observers, citizens. They ask questions. They read the posted proposal out loud to their neighbors. One woman sings it to the rhythm of laundry being beaten against stone. There are disagreements, of course. 3 terms is too few, says the baker. Too many, replies the man buying bread. Too much yeast, the baker mutters, and still the island talks. Your name comes up more often now. You're that one, right? Says a fisherman. The one who stood up? Asks a child. Do you have any figs? Asks the pigeon guy. You don't mind, until someone knocks on your door. You open it. It's a woman you've never seen before. Her face is weathered like driftwood, but her eyes are sharp as thorns. You're going to run, aren't you? You blink. What? She doesn't repeat it. Just looks at you as if measuring. Then, I hope you do. But if you do, be better than the last dozen. She leaves without another word. You stand there for a long time. The breeze tugs at your sleeve like a question. The night before the citizen vote, the town square is lit with paper lanterns. Not a celebration, more like a gathering of breath. People bring food. Someone plays a flute. Children run barefoot, giggling through the shadows. Irenaeus finds you sitting on the edge of the fountain, watching the flickering lights. You did good, he says. I wasn't alone, he nods. No one ever is. But not everyone shows up. You did! He sits beside you. You're thinking about running, aren't you? You say nothing. He continues anyway. Don't decide tonight. Decide after the vote, after the shouting stops and the bread is stale. He stands and stretches. See you tomorrow, candidate that isn't yet. You sigh, but you don't correct him. The next morning the bells ring twice. Everyone gathers near the hall. The vote will be public. Small island tradition. Each citizen steps forward one by one and places a white or black stone into a large jar. White for yes, black for no. You watch them come, old, young, bent-backed and bouncing. Some argue in line, some hum, some whisper a prayer. It takes hours, but at the end, when the stones are counted, the decision is clear. The 3-timers law is approved by a wide margin. Applause shouting. A goat braying somewhere in triumph. You feel it like thunder under your ribs. You help do this. And now comes what Mentes warned you about. What? Irenaeus hinted at. The next choice. You could walk away, you could stay a citizen, or you could run for office. You could step into the place where decisions are made. Not just argued. That night you sit by the harbor again. The water is still. The stars are bright enough to read your future by. And somewhere, deep in your bones, a new thought stirs. Not, what if I lose? But what if I win? The air holds its breath with you. The island waits. You're not quite sure when you decided. Maybe it was the way the stones clacked in the jar, one after another, as the vote passed. Maybe it was Irenaeus calling you candidate that isn't yet, with that smug half smile. Or maybe it was just the quiet moment after everything ended. When the lanterns had gone out, the benches were empty, and the wind carried the smell of olives and the sea. But you wake up the next morning with a phrase sitting neatly at the edge of your mind, like a cat that's made itself comfortable. You're going to run, you say it out loud, the walls don't laugh. The goat across the road might, but he does that anyway. You step into your sandals, splash your face with cold water, and open the shutters to a blinding sun. Your first supporter appears 5 minutes later. It's not who you expect. It's the woman who sells pickled onions, I heard, she says, handing you a jar. Eat this before you speak in public. Clears the voice, also clears the room, but you'll be memorable. The campaign begins, if you can even call it that. On a tiny Greek island with fewer people than a mid-sized cruise ship, campaigning doesn't look like polished speeches or billboard signs. It looks like conversations delivered over laundry, lines or shared plates of figs. It sounds like, so what exactly would you do if elected? And I remember your uncle, he cheated at marbles. Also, do you support the donkey shelter initiative? You hadn't heard of that last. 1. But now you have an opinion because apparently that's what candidates do. You start writing notes, mostly scribbles, ideas, reminders, awkward metaphors. One page just says, do not mention fish tax ever again in angry underlines. You meet with mentees. He's leaned even further into retirement, which somehow includes feeding gulls from his rooftop while wearing only one sandal. Advice, you ask? He considers. Talk less, listen more. Also, don't promise anything you can't unpromise later. Is that ethical? It's ancient. He tosses a crumb to a bird, then adds, and remember, people don't vote for perfection. They vote for the person they can complain to without guilt. You leave with more questions than answers. The council elections happen once every 6 years. Only 3 seats rotate at a time to prevent chaos. This year, 1 seat is open. Thales isn't running again. He says it's time to let someone else argue with Nicandros. Your only opponent is Menon. He's not a bad man, but he's a known man. His family's been on the council twice already. He runs the grain warehouse. He donates sheep to the annual festival. Also, he has very good teeth, which you're surprised to find is an actual political advantage. Still, you're not discouraged. Just itchy, like wearing a tunic that doesn't quite fit. You spend your days walking, across sun-bleached roads and past gossiping shutters. You talk to everyone, to the young mother who wants cleaner streets, to the fisherman who thinks council meetings should end before sundown, to the carpenter who's tired of the seagulls stealing his lunch. Somewhere along the way you stop trying to sound like someone else. You just speak, like you would at the bakery, or the pier, or in your kitchen with too much salt in the soup and not enough time to fix it. 3 days before the vote, there's a public forum. The whole village shows up. Well, except the goat. He's been banned after last time. You and Menon sit side by side at a wooden table. A pitcher of water between you, 1 cup. It feels symbolic. Thales moderates because of course he does. He looks delighted to be in charge of something again. Let's begin, he says. Opening remarks, you first. Menon stands. He launches into a well-practiced speech, mentions his family's history, his experience with the grain crisis, his vision for steady leadership. He sits, you stand, and your heart is a nervous, clumsy thing in your chest. But you remember what Mentes said. Talk less. Listen more. So you start with a story. About the day you carried firewood for a woman who once voted against your uncle. About how she grumbled the entire way, then gave you figs at the end. Democracy, you say, isn't about agreement. It's about showing up. Even when we disagree, especially when we disagree, you keep it short. No applause, but no silence either. Just thoughtful heads tilted, brows furrowed in the way they do when someone says something they weren't expecting, but maybe needed. Thales nods. Let's open the floor. And it begins. Question after question. What's your plan for waste management? Will you protect the old well near the school? Do you support the donkey shelter? Yes, you've learned now. And then, of course, Nicandros. What makes you think you can lead when you've never even chaired a committee? Do you know how complicated it is to organize a budget? You breathe, then answer. No, I don't know how complicated it is, yet, but I know how to ask for help. I know how to admit when I don't know something. And I know how to listen without making it about me. It hangs there. Then a voice from the back. Well, that's new. More laughter than you expected. Later, after the forum ends, you step into the cool night air. You're exhausted and calm like a string that's finally stopped vibrating. The morning of the election is grey, which feels appropriate. You cast your vote early, then walk the coastline for hours. You don't talk to anyone, not even the goat. The results are posted on a single board near the square, in neat ink. With no fanfare. You're not there when it happens. You're picking figs, which somehow feels like the right place to be. Then Irenaeus finds you, says only, "You won." You blink. "Are you serious?" "As the council budget," he says, handing you the basket you dropped. You stand there for a moment, not elated, not stunned, just a present, like the world is slightly clearer, the colors a bit sharper, and then he grins. "So, what's your first decision, councillor?" You look out at the sea, then down at the figs, then up at him. "I think I'm going to start by listening," he laughs. "Good answer." The wind shifts. You feel it on your skin like a promise. Later, you walk back through town. You hear it. "Councillor," someone calls. "Make us proud," says another. "Don't forget the donkey shelter," adds a third. You smile, and this time it fits, like a tunic that's been worn in just enough. You arrive at the council hall alone. You pause outside the door, then step through. The island waits, and you, at last, are ready to speak. The council hall smells like oil lamps and damp sandals. You sit in your new chair, third from the left, just beside Nicandros, who doesn't even try to hide his sigh. Someone's carved a tiny fish into the underside of the table. You run your finger along the groove and wonder how many others have done the same. There's no ceremony, no grand welcome. Just Thales handing you a wax tablet with a schedule and saying, "Good luck, you'll need it." First order of business? A dispute about fishing nets. Not the sexy kind of politics. The nets, apparently, are being dried in the wrong place. Again. The smell is driving the bakers mad, and someone's goat chewed through one, mistaking it for seaweed. You're barely 15 minutes into your new role when you realize that democracy, in practice, is just a very elaborate version of community bickering. And it is beautifully exhausting, because every complaint is a thread, and every thread is tied to someone's dignity, someone's memory, someone's cousin's cousin who once tripped over a net and swore revenge. You listen. You make a note. Proposed designated net drying zone. You underline it twice. Nicandros rolls his eyes. "Welcome to public service," he mutters. "The rest of the day is no less glamorous. A request to repaint the marketplace cistern with blue flowers. A missing ledger that may or may not have been borrowed by Irenaeus for his poetry. A disagreement about whether a shed counts as a permanent structure and therefore subject to roof taxes. And through it all, people look at you now, not as that quiet one from the voting forum, but as someone who can fix things, which is terrifying, because you're not magic. You're not wise. You barely remember to eat lunch, but you keep listening. And slowly, like the tide reshaping stone, something in the way you exist here starts to shift. You find your rhythm. Your mornings begin early, with letters and voice messages scratched into thin wax tablets. Your afternoons are spent walking, always walking, because nothing gets done behind a desk. People won't say what they really need until you're leaning on their fence or helping them gather olives. You learn how to read the rhythm of the island, who speaks first at meetings, always Nicandros, who pretends not to care but actually tracks every vote, the pickle vendor, who waits until the very end of a session to drop the most important topic just before everyone's too tired to argue, mentes of course. One afternoon a child tugs your sleeve. "Are you the one who makes the rules?" You blink. "No," you say slowly, "but I help make sure we all follow them." She squints up at you, clearly unimpressed. I think we should have more music at dinner. Then she runs off. You write it down anyway. Music at dinner. Why not? That night, you can't sleep. Too many thoughts. Too many voices replaying in your head like a choir with no conductor. So you climb the hill behind the town, the one with the broken sundial and the moss-covered stone where the old poet used to nap. You sit, and for the first time in weeks, you let yourself feel small again. The stars are arrogant tonight, flung across the sky like someone overconfident with glitter. You imagine how many other people have sat right here, under this very sky, wondering the same thing. Am I doing this right? You remember what Thales said once. There's no such thing as doing it right, just doing it earnestly. You breathe, and in the dark, something quiet settles in your chest. A kind of peace, not because you have the answers, but because you've stopped expecting to. By week 3, a rhythm develops in the council. Thales hums before he disagrees. Nicandros has started calling you the young moderate, which is probably his way of saying not completely useless. You lead your first vote. It's about the donkey shelter. Naturally, Irenaeus makes an impassioned speech about hoof safety and emotional well-being. Someone brings up the ancient prophecy that once warned, "Beware the hooves in your heart." You suspect it was a joke, but the record keeper writes it down anyway. The vote passes unanimously, and just like that, you've helped build a donkey shelter. You don't mention it in your dreams, but you feel it in your spine, in your smile. You're part of something that stretches beyond you. One morning, there's a storm, not metaphorically. An actual, angry, wet sky beast of a storm that thrashes the coastline and blows over 2 market stalls. And suddenly, this isn't theory anymore, this is logistics. You scramble. You coordinate. You delegate. You listen to the stonecutter who knows how water moves through town. You reassure the woman whose fig tree collapsed onto her husband's boat. You organize firewood, then hand out towels. It's not dramatic. It's not perfect. But by nightfall, the lanterns are glowing, the streets are safe, and someone's managed to fry fresh octopus again. You sit on the steps of the hall, dripping wet, chewing, and exhausted and smiling, because this is what you were meant to do. Then comes the petition, a real one, with signatures and passionate opinions, and 2 people shouting about sand. Apparently, one of the northern coves is being overused by tourists, by which they mean 4 people with a boat and a loud loot. The locals want it restricted. The fishers want it open. Someone just wants to be left alone with their seashells. You listen, you read, you walk to the cove, you sit there in the afternoon haze while 2 teenage boys argue about whether this counts as public memory space, and then you decide. You write a compromise. Access allowed during specific hours, fishing limited, lute playing prohibited between noon and 4 p.m. Nicandros calls it surprisingly functional. You take it as a compliment. Weeks pass, then months. You stop checking your chair before sitting. You stop flinching when people call you counselor. You even start answering to it. You still forget your lunch sometimes. But now someone brings you a roll before meetings. It's covered in sesame seeds. Slightly burnt. Perfect. You've helped pass 6 proposals. 1 failed. That one about renaming the town square after a very minor god of sneeze avoidance. Long story. But the rest, they stand. Small things mostly. A community chalkboard. A schedule. Full shared tools. Guidelines for bonfire safety during festivals. And yes, the donkey shelter. With a roof shaped like a hat, because Irenaeus insisted. You're not changing the world, but you're changing your corner of it. And sometimes that's even harder. Late one evening, you find a note on your chair, folded, unsigned. Inside, it says, "You make the meetings slower, but you make us better. You keep it tucked in your sandal strap just in case." You wake up with sore legs and an ink stain on your cheek. At first, you think maybe it's a dream again, the kind where you're late to a council vote and everyone is shouting in goat. But no, you really did fall asleep on your work table. Again, the wax tablet under your cheek still bears the imprint of your face. That's probably going to bruise. You rub your temples, blink at the sun slicing across the shutters and sigh, deeply, like someone who has heard the phrase, "But that's how we've always done it," One too many times, because today, dear, listener is budget day, and nobody, absolutely nobody, enjoys budget day. By the time you get to the council hall, the arguments have already started. We can't reduce the Olive Festival budget. The Olives would know. We're not paying for a second town bell. The first one still works, it's just dramatic. We need to repaint the statues. Dionysus is flaking again. People think it's intentional. You sit, you listen, you sip your weak tea and quietly wish for an earthquake. Nothing tragic. Just enough to delay things a few hours. But you don't get an earthquake. You get a long, tedious, soul-scraping debate over how many chickens are truly necessary for the annual spring parade. Apparently, someone wants 36. Someone else says 6. Someone else suggests a mechanical chicken for future-proofing. Nicandros wants none. You just want a nap. Still, as the hours drag on, you notice something strange. People are starting to compromise. Not dramatically, not tearfully. But there are fewer slammed tablets, fewer shouted, "That's absurd," retorts. They're listening to each other. They're copying your tone. You lean back, let it happen, like a parent watching toddlers. Finally agree on who gets the blue spoon. You even find yourself smiling when Irenaeus presents a poem in lieu of financial projections. It's bad, but heartfelt. And somehow, in that strange swirl of civic engagement, fiscal responsibility, and pigeon-related metaphors, the budget gets approved, with minor cuts to the ceremonial hat fund. You sign off on it, hands ink-streaked. Then exhale through your nose so hard you nearly unseat a passing fly. Afterwards, Thales finds you outside watching two cats fight over a fig. "Not bad," he says. You arch an eyebrow. That's basically applause. "Coming from me," he adds. You nod, accepting it like one accepts rain, without thanks but with quiet appreciation. Then he adds, "You're being invited to the Outer Isles meeting next month." You blink. That's new. The Outer Isles are like older cousins who went to law school and make fun of your sandals. They haven't taken your little island seriously in years, but apparently someone's been paying attention. You agree to go, with a tight throat and a half nod, because leaving your island even for a few days feels like abandoning your post, like setting down the pot just as it's starting to boil. In the following days you prepare, not with fancy speeches or silk tunics, gods know, but with maps, with stories, with numbers that matter, and anecdotes that mean more than numbers. You. Practice your introduction. I'm not here to tell you what we do better. I'm here to show you what works when everyone has a voice. It sounds sincere, slightly smug, perfect. You even have Nicandros test it. He winces. Lose the hand gesture. Noted. The day arrives. You leave before sunrise, the small boat, waiting like a nervous dog at the dock. Several villagers come to see you off, some with baskets, some with skeptical looks, all with opinions. Someone shouts, "Don't let them talk you into fireworks." Someone else yells, "Bring back better sandals." You wave, then you're off. The sea is calm, the sun low and buttery. Gulls wheel overhead, as if escorting you to your fate. It takes 5 hours to reach the larger island, 5 hours of creaking. Wood, lukewarm dried figs, and quiet mental rehearsal. You step onto the dock with dust on your boots and confidence in your spine. You are here, and you are ready. The council chamber of the Outer Isles is intimidating, wider, taller. There's a mural of Poseidon in the background, smiting something. Probably symbolic, probably unnecessary. Everyone here wears longer robes. They talk in longer sentences. Their sandals match, but you don't shrink. You sit. You listen. You answer when spoken to. And when it's your turn to speak, you keep it simple. You talk about the donkey shelter, the voting tiles, the child who wanted music at dinner. And as you speak, something unexpected happens. People listen, really listen, not just because it's novel or quaint, but because they recognize something ancient in what you're saying, something true. By the end, one of the councillors stands and says, "We were going to vote on dismissing your proposal. I move we vote on adopting it." There's murmuring, then silence, then nods, then a vote. You don't win everything, but you win enough, and that's something. That night, you sit by the harbor alone. The waves here are louder, the stars more scattered, but the air smells the same. salt and candle wax and too much hope. You write a letter to the council back home. You thank them. You remind them to double-check the eel licenses. You ask if the bakery finally agreed to trial those new sesame loaves. You sign it. From G-Door, your sleepy councillor, currently not ruining everything. You send it with the next boat. Then you fall asleep on the dock. Back home, when you return, no one throws a parade, which is perfect. Instead, you're greeted with a dozen small things: a fresh tunic, a warm hand clasp, someone saying, "I was glad you're back, the goats are plotting again." You settle into your seat at the council hall. You look around at your fellow islanders, some snoring, some debating, some arguing over who moved the ceremonial hammer, and it's perfect because you're no longer an outsider. You're not even just a voice. You're part of the song now, low, steady, and stubbornly hopeful, like the sea around you. The first thing you notice when you wake up the next morning is the silence. Not the good kind, like the hush just before dawn or the quiet hum of waves slapping lazily at the harbor wall. No, this is suspicious silence, the kind that makes you sit up too fast and hit your head on the shelf above your cot. You stumble to the door, still half dreaming of budget disputes and overly enthusiastic baklava vendors, and throw it open to find nothing. No children playing, no goats bleating, no town crier loudly mispronouncing words he refuses to look up. Just wind and dust, and that one chicken strutting down the road like it owns the judiciary. You squint. Something is definitely off, and that's when you hear it, faint from the direction of the temple square. A sound like a dozen people arguing through thick cloth. You follow it, half walking, half hurrying, until you reach the crowd. At the center stands Thales, arms folded. Expression like someone who just bit into a pomegranate and found a pebble. Around him, a group of villagers argues, not shouting, just repeating variations of the same sentence. What if we just don't vote this time? You blink. Wait, what? Turns out, this is the island's version of a civic tantrum. They're calling it the pause. Apparently, several villagers, exhausted from months of voting on everything from eel tariffs to ceremonial bread thickness, have decided to abstain from all votes this week. Just 1 week, they say, to recharge. You ask cautiously what this means. Thales rubs his forehead and says, "It means we can't legally approve repairs for the granary roof, or pay the harbor workers, or renew the goat tax exemption, which, I should note, expired yesterday." You wince a lot. This is how you end up in what can only be described as a democratic intervention. You go door to door, gently reminding people that while rest is important, so is stopping the grain from molding. You host a listening circle, where people describe their decision fatigue, which admittedly is a very real thing when your island votes on what color to paint the outhouse shutters. You hear phrases like, "We love democracy," just not daily. "My donkey has a better attendance record than me." "I accidentally voted yes on something I thought was a dessert." So you do what any good councillor would do. You propose a compromise. It's called deliberation. Days, 2 days a week, fixed, official. Like market day, but with more sighing. On deliberation days, everyone shows up. They vote, they argue, they collectively roll their eyes. The rest of the week, they live. No votes, no councils, just life. You draft it, present it, debate it. It passes, unanimously. The crowd cheers, not wildly, but in that slow, sleepy, satisfied way that says, finally, someone gets it. You celebrate with a slice of fig cake and a nap in the shade. Progress has never tasted so soft. Later that week, as you stroll past the agora, you hear someone practicing a speech. You pause behind a pillar. It's Damaris, the shy weaver's apprentice, practicing for her first open assembly. Her topic? Reforming the town's lending practices. You listen quietly, heart full. Not because she's perfect, she fumbles her third sentence and says goat-based economy when she means gold-backed currency, but because she's trying, and she sounds like she belongs, like someone who knows her voice matters. You step away before she sees you. Let her shine without shadows. That night, during the wind-down meal, bread, olives, and something suspiciously gelatinous, you sit with your fellow councillors under the lanterns. The light flickers, casting dancing shapes on your faces. Nicandros asks, "So, do you think it'll last?" He doesn't mean dinner. You think about it, about how fragile democracy is, how it depends on patience, repetition, empathy, and enough. Ink to drown a mule. But you also think about Damaris and the fig cake, and the ceremonial hammer which now lives in a locked cabinet because it was too empowering. You nod. I think it might. The next day brings something unexpected. A letter, sealed with blue wax and bearing the sigil of the Central Archipelago Council. You open it, half expecting another budget request or a firm denial of your proposal to limit warhorn usage after sunset, but instead it says, "You are hereby invited to represent your island at the Grand Archipelago Conclave next month." This is not a request. You blink. Thales leans over your shoulder. "Conclave," he says. "That's new." You nod slowly. "This is different, bigger, more formal, and probably way too political." Preparation begins at once. You consult with the oldest villagers, many of whom haven't left the island in decades. They offer advice like, wear something you can run in, and never accept olives from a man who says he doesn't like goats. You thank them, sort of. Then you spend 2 weeks crafting your presentation. Stories, statistics, even one mildly humorous painting of a fish market negotiation gone wrong. You rehearse in front of goats. They're terrible critics, but they don't interrupt. When the day finally comes, you're ready, or as ready as anyone can be before facing 300 mildly cynical island representatives who all think they invented cooperative governance. You board the transport ship with your head high, your scrolls packed and your sandals upgraded, just slightly, a gesture of goodwill, not vanity. Probably. The voyage is rough. Waves taller than the town's second bell tower. You arrive a little green and a lot tired, but still standing. The conclave is held in a massive amphitheater, stone seats rising like waves around a central platform. Flags flap, delegates chatter, someone drops a crate of oranges. You find your seat and wait. Your turn comes late in the day. The sun has shifted, the crowd is restless, but when you step forward, scroll in hand, something clicks. You tell them about your island, the votes, the mistakes, the small victories and the smaller ones. You speak plainly, softly, but with weight. And when you're done, there's a long pause. Then applause. Not thunderous, but steady. Enough. You return home 2 days later. The villagers greet you with garlands. Bread and that one chicken, who still believes it's mayor. You hug Thales, you shake hands with Nicandros, you thank Damaris, who smiles so wide you think her face might split. And as the sun sets, you return to your favorite spot, under the A. Lanterns beside the sea. Someone passes you a cup of wine, you sip, listen, smile, because here, in this small democracy of figs, goats, and well-meaning chaos, you've helped build something real. You wake up again to the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through your window. It's a scent that wraps around you like a warm cloak, comforting and familiar, yet somehow carrying the weight of promise. The morning sun peeks over the hills, casting long shadows that stretch lazily across the cobblestones, as if the day itself is reluctant to start. You pull on your sandals, the worn leather creaking just enough to remind you they're real, not some polished replica from the mainland. The air tastes salty and faintly of herbs drying on racks nearby. Somewhere a donkey brays, clearly not thrilled with the early hour. Today is special. You know it, even before you hear the whispers floating on the breeze. The town square is preparing for the annual Festival of Lights. The festival is both celebration and ritual, a blend of the old ways and the new, where lanterns float above the harbor like tiny stars set loose from the sky. The villagers gather to honor the sun's return and to give thanks for the year's harvest. There's laughter, music, and the constant scent of roasting lamb mingling with sweet honey cakes. You watch from the sidelines, feeling the soft murmur of conversations and the clinking of cups. It's noisy in a gentle way, like waves lapping against a familiar shore. Children dart between legs, chasing fireflies or each other, their voices high-pitched and full of endless energy. You find yourself thinking, no matter how complicated politics get, no matter how many votes or debates, this, The simple joy is why it all matters. But the festival isn't just about merriment. In the midst of the revelry, the council gathers in the temple, surrounded by flickering torchlight and fragrant incense. Tonight they will decide on the most delicate of issues, the selection of the next island herald. The herald's role is both honor and burden. They speak for the island in times of peace and conflict, their voice carrying far beyond these rocky shores. And everyone wants to have the best speaker, the most persuasive storyteller, the one who can charm even the surliest sailor. You observe the candidates. There's a fisherman with a booming laugh and a knack for spinning tales taller than the cliffs. There's a young scholar whose eyes shine with quiet intelligence and nerves barely contained. And then there's Irenaeus, the poet who almost ruined the budget debate, but won hearts with his bad rhymes. The debate is long and winding, much like the island's winding, paths that lead to nowhere and everywhere at once. Speeches rise and fall like the tide, each candidate weaving words with hope and flair. You notice how the villagers listen, sometimes nodding, sometimes frowning, occasionally whispering to neighbors. The air is thick with anticipation and a hint of that democratic magic. Everyone's voice counts, even if some voices are barely above the breeze. In a quiet moment, you catch yourself holding your breath. Not because the decision is urgent, but because this simple, earnest discourse is the heartbeat of your island. At last the vote is cast. Irenaeus wins by a single vote. The crowd erupts, not into cheers, but a soft applause that feels like a shared secret. Irenaeus blushes, stumbles over his acceptance speech, and promises to do his best not to break any more budgets. You smile, because in this small victory lies a larger truth. Democracy here isn't perfect. It's messy, it's slow, and sometimes it's downright silly, but it's yours and it's alive. Later, as the lanterns bob gently over the water, you walk alone along the pier. The night is cool, the stars scattered like spilled salt across the sky. You think of all the voices you've heard, all the choices made and unmade, all the small moments stitched together to form the fabric of this island's life. And as you breathe in the salty night air, you realize something important. Democracy isn't just about laws or votes. It's about people, about connection, about the quiet hope that no matter what, your voice matters, even when the world feels heavy and complicated. You pause. Listen. A soft breeze brushes past, carrying the distant laughter of children, the creak of a boat returning home, the rustle of olive leaves. It's a lullaby, a reminder that here, in this tiny corner of the world, the whispering laws aren't just rules. They're the gentle hum of a community dreaming together. You close your eyes, let the night wrap around you and let yourself drift, carried by the soft murmur of democracy, the steady rhythm of belonging, and the promise of another dawn. Here we are, at the edge of this long, winding path we've walked together. The night is deep and soft, and the quiet hum of the sea seems to pulse gently beneath the stars. You settle into your favorite spot, that old stone bench overlooking the harbor where lanterns float like suspended dreams. You feel the cool breeze brush your skin, carrying with it faint scents of rosemary and salt, earthy and familiar. Somewhere nearby, a dog sighs in its sleep, and the distant clatter of a fishing boat returns to its mooring. It's a chorus of calm that seems to breathe with you. You think back over all the stories, how this tiny island, no bigger than a single street in a city far away, has fought and faltered and triumphed through its own kind of democracy. A democracy not defined by grand speeches or sweeping reforms, but by the small daily acts of showing up, listening, and sometimes just saying, "I'm tired today." It's messy, yes, slow, sometimes painfully so, and full of contradictions. The kind where a goat tax can spark debates that last days, or a chicken insists on being mayor in spirit, if not in law. Yet, in all its imperfection, it hums with a quiet beauty. Maybe that's the real secret. Not the laws written on parchment or the votes tallied on tablets, but the whispered agreements between neighbors, the shared laughter at the marketplace, the kindness in an outstretched hand. You remember the faces you met along the way, Damaris with her hopeful speech, Thales and his weary wisdom, Irenaeus and his clumsy charm. each one a thread in this tapestry of community, each voice a note in the soft song of belonging. You feel your body relaxing deeper into the bench, the stone cool against your skin, your breath slow and even. The world outside this island may be loud and complicated, filled with clamor and haste, but here, in this moment, all that fades. The gentle rustle of olive branches, the distant murmur of waves, the soft flicker of lantern light, all wrap around you like a lullaby. So, as you let your eyes close, imagine yourself walking along that pebbled shore, the tide brushing at your feet, the sky stretching endlessly above. Remember that even the smallest voice can echo far when spoken with care. That democracy is less about perfection and more about persistence, and that sometimes the most powerful laws are whispered softly between friends beneath the quiet stars. Rest now. Let the calm settle deep into your bones. Let the hum of this tiny Greek island democracy lull you into a peaceful sleep. You've journeyed far. You've listened well. And now, it's time to dream. End of script. Sweet dreams.